Hey everyone, Bruce Morris from the Tab Group here. Welcome to Tab Forum's Market Structure Wave. Market insight, innovation, and implementation are three critical factors all successful enterprises must master to remain successful in business today. These components also happen to be the key tenets of the Plato Partnership and their upcoming 9th annual Market Innovator, also known as MI3 Academic Conference, to be held in London on July 1st. Today, we are very fortunate to have Rebecca Healey, Managing Partner, Red Lab Consulting, join us to discuss Plato's upcoming MI3 conference and to take a sneak peek at her research on connectivity in the age of AI. Hey, Rebecca, welcome to Tab Forum.
Thank you for having me again. Good to be back.
Our pleasure. So, Rebecca, to get started, could you give us a brief outline of the core purpose of the MI3 conference and why is it such an important event?
I think what's so different about MI3 is essentially the industry has an awful lot of conferences and they're all very valuable in their own way. But MI3 is slightly different because it's bridging that gap between academia and industry. And I sort of like to think about it, it's trying to answer the bigger questions that heads of dealing potentially have around the direction of travel in the industry that they might not necessarily have time and attention to spend on in their day-to-day working environments, because obviously everybody's super pressured. But it is looking at sort of like the bigger topics. So, for example, a couple of years ago, before T+1 was a thing, we looked into that for Plato. And more recently, we're looking at things around collateral demand in funding markets, the cost of actually trading in emerging markets, which is obviously, as people are starting to look at more global mandates, it's becoming more of a thing. And also we're also going to be discussing retail limit orders and just the direction of travel in bridging retail markets in with wholesale and the dominance of RFQ. So it's really looking at a very wide spectrum of topics that might not be part and parcel of people's day-to-day working environment, but really do pose important questions about market structure overall.
Great, thanks for sharing. So can you give us a sense of your personal involvement with the MI3 conference and the type of research that you've contributed this year?
Yes, of course. So basically, I was approached by Plato to look into the rising costs of the EMS as a means for market participants to connect to the market. And that became quite interesting because obviously I've been doing a lot of work on AI in trading, and technology is becoming so essential for market participants to engage with the market and will become even more essential as we move forward. So it was really starting to look into what exactly are the challenges in relation to connectivity. And connectivity, you know, people think it's sort of like literally the fixed pipe and the connection, but actually what you're starting to see is it's so multifaceted, whether you're looking at the actual EMS itself, so the actual internal technology piece, so the platform, the license and all the data analytics, integration costs that go with that, but you've also got all the internal systems, so the servers, the networks, cloud, colo, firewalls. Then you've got your market data costs, and those obviously have been the subject of a lot of contentious debate more recently. But you've also got your external connectivity. So essentially the lease lines, the VPN, market data feeds, and then your exchange and venue fees, the messaging fees and the transaction costs, and the support and compliance that has to underpin all of that. So it's by no means a small undertaking, but I think what did become very apparent very quickly was that you haven't got a one size fits all. And I think what has grown over time, so if we go back sort of like a couple of decades now, really, you know, the EMS started when the single dealer platforms that the banks were running were essentially going along and putting a PC on a trader's desk to say, this is how you send us order flow. And over the years, that's evolved. But as we move across the asset classes, essentially, you've got an economic model that is no longer functioning. And the complexity also links into the opacity around who is actually paying what for what service. And 86% of the firms that I spoke to said they don't have full visibility into what their brokers are being charged. And it's now becoming a question of, if we are going to increase the level of connectivity within the marketplace, we really need to get to sort of the basics of actually having a better comprehension in terms of what those cost structures are, whether it's due to the complexity of the model, whether it's due to more the bundled nature of fees, or really the fact that we now need to move to a much more sort of transparent and auditable pricing structure. And I think this is really what the gist of the research is about. So again, really trying to bring to the surface what was some of the challenges in the industry today.
Well, it sounds very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about your research, connectivity in the age of AI. And it sounds like you cannot open up a newspaper or a website. I was going to say a magazine. Don't see too many magazines these days, but without reading about AI and its impact on not just the financial services business, but every business out there. Can you walk us through some of the key takeaways that you'll be exploring in your research or at the conference?
Yes, sure. So essentially, the research covers sort of like the state of play today, because a lot of this has sort of come to pass as we've seen the rise in bilateral models. So it's more around additional order types that are being passed on, or the buy side are actually requesting for it. And then it's coming down to, as I say, who is actually paying for what. There's arguments that brokers are billed for inactive users or dormant connections or obsolete services. So I think that's something that really there needs to be greater transparency as to who is being charged, how they're being charged, and what is being paid for. So then it's looking into actually what is the impact of those hidden costs in terms of why is this becoming such an issue now? And I mentioned that the costs related to receiving, routing, and managing flow via an EMS/OS platform is increasing significantly. And the transactional fees on algo flow in particular is becoming a far higher proportion. There's also clients using a lot more sort of quant flow activity, which again can be charged at higher transactional rates. Whereas a broker might only be earning less commission. So you've got a sort of disconnect again in terms of the economics of the model and whether that actually works. And finally, what we're sort of alluding to is actually what is the impact on the market here, because some of the smaller brokers and asset managers are potentially losing access in terms of the unsustainable business model. Certain brokers are pulling out of certain offerings. Now, we can say that this is just market economics and this is just part of the course. But I think as we are moving to more sort of dominance in automated trading across different asset classes, that actually is creating a potential issue in terms of whether everybody has equitable access to the market as we're moving away from sort of central limit order books to more multiple means of interaction. So I think really what we're focused on and what the research is discussing is not necessarily pointing the finger of blame at any one market participant, but really trying to establish what is a fair, transparent, and standardized means for ensuring that everybody retains access to markets. And so that we're sort of recommending clear pricing models, whether that is per user, per connection, or per volume. and mandating more itemized billing so that there's actually very clear what people are paying for in terms of the service type, the activation date, the last usage, and the relevant client and the services that they're actually paying for. So it's more about trying to shine a light on what is perceived as very opaque, but also ensure that actually people get access to the markets that they need.
So my final question was going to be, what is, what are you particularly excited about? But it sounds like it's an all of the above, given all the different parts of the equation that your research has dove into. Is there one particular area that gets you more excited than any of the others?
Well, I think it comes back down to the fact that we're moving into a more AI-dominated environment. And I know sort of historically there's been this idea that AI will not be involved in trading because this is more sort of, obviously when it comes to execution, you need more deterministic machine learning models. However, that being said, the more generative aspects in terms of the information that's going to be taken in to the trading decisions means that technology is going to be part and parcel of how trades occur. And like anytime access, sort of the move towards more 24/7 markets, the integration of DeFi and TradFi, the additional asset classes tokenization, all of this means that we are going to be highly dependent on connectivity and interoperability. So I think it's almost like we have the opportunity right now to get our house in order in terms of having a better level of transparency around connectivity, pricing and models per se, which I think whilst it is a challenging topic to address, I think in the end, everyone will benefit from this level of increased transparency.
It wasn't on my original list of questions, but have you seen any agentic examples that is included in your research or that you think is going to impact the market?
That's not necessarily in this piece of research because we focus very much on connectivity, but you're right. I think it's sort of like the increase around ideas of agentic AI mean that it's going to change the landscape yet again. And, things like agent-to-agent trading protocols and information protocols means that there will need to be greater standardization of data and standardization of interoperability. And frankly, greater industry adoption of open source architecture, which we do talk about in the report, because people are recognizing that actually the structure that we've grown up with in terms of legacy systems, it does require a rethink. We need to start thinking about having a clear strategy for the technology that does need to be integrated and getting vendors and internal teams on what is now required. And it's sort of really trying to rethink the way that we approach it. I even look at things like the progress that fixed trading protocol has made, FTC3. People are recognizing that this is the next level up in terms of integration and connectivity to make markets operate much more successfully for the benefit of all.
Well, maybe that'll be next year's report then.
Definitely touch on it in this one.
Yeah. So Rebecca, this year's MI3 sounds like an amazing event. Thanks so much for sharing your time and insights with Tab Forum today. And to all our viewers, if you can make it to London on July 1st for Plato's MI3 conference, there'll be a big red button at the end of this video that'll take you to the registration page. Hey, thanks again, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me, Bruce. Great to be back.